We have our next speaker already here. He will be talking about behavioral data creation for AI, delivering value and insight. It's Axel Dean from Snowplow Analytics. You are the co-founder and CEO of Snowplow Analytics, and before co-founding that institution, you worked in various technology roles at OpenX in the business intelligence department at Deloitte, consulting in various strategy roles. So the next 20 minutes are yours. We're excited for your insights. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. And yeah, it's great to be here. So I'm going to talk to you all for the next 20 minutes about behavioral data and the creation of behavioral data. So don't worry if these are new terms. I'm going to explain why these are important and why these really help you to create awesome AI applications. Next. Okay, so my name's Alex Dean. I'm one of the two co-founders of Snowplow, also the CEO. So I've been working at the intersection of behavioral analytics, BI, AI, data warehousing my whole career. I co-founded Snowplow. We'll talk about Snowplow shortly in 2012 as an open source project. I also wrote a book for Manning about event streams. So a little bit about Snowplow. We'll talk more about Snowplow, but Snowplow's a behavioral data platform. We allow companies to create very rich, proprietary, granular, first-party data about their customers' own behavior. And we created Snowplow 10 years ago to level the playing field between companies like the FANG companies, the Silicon Valley startups that have hundreds of data engineers, and the rest of us, so that organizations outside of Silicon Valley can also deeply understand your customers. And we'll talk more about Snowplow in a moment. So I want to talk about a new trend. I want to talk about the trend of data applications. And this is a really, really big theme. It's emerging, it's new, but data applications are really central to unlocking the competitive advantage of data. And we see market leaders now in data that are building tens, hundreds of data applications powered off very rich customer behavioral data sets. So a couple of examples on the slide. So Strava is a customer of ours. They generate huge volumes of data, 4 billion events a day with Snowplow. That all feeds into their Snowflake to power some very cool data applications. And then DPG is a Belgian media group. They capture very rich reader, viewer data in real time, and then use that for content personalization. So this is the Norvig quote. So more data beats clever algorithms, but better data, higher quality data beats more data. And that's kind of what I want to talk about briefly. So this is kind of, you might not have sort of seen this framing of data before, but we think a lot in terms of a lot of the existing data that AI and advanced analytics teams work with is kind of fed off data exhaust. So a lot of companies by now have adopted packaged analytics tools, they've adopted mobile analytics platforms, customer data platforms, all sorts of kind of line of business analytics packages and marketing packages. The problem is that the data that you get out of those systems is kind of exhaust data. And what a lot of companies have ended up doing is building these quite large data teams to try and wrangle that exhaust and flow that through into downstream use cases. But it's tough. It's really tough. And if you've got a lot of analytics engineers who are grappling using things like dbt to make sense of those source systems, then you probably recognize part of this problem. So the problem with data exhaust is that it's not designed for AI. It's not designed for these intense analytics applications. It's difficult to understand. It doesn't help you build features for your ML models. The tables need a lot of integration, a lot of kind of analytics engineering. The structures are irregular. You need to do a lot of validation on the data because it's very unreliable. And it raises a lot of sovereignty and kind of compliance issues, especially in Europe, but increasingly in the US and beyond. So if we think about the kind of data you probably get out of some of those kind of packaged systems, you've got like different event names, you've got columns that you don't understand, you've got columns that aren't reliable, you've got columns like IP addresses that create an awful lot of compliance risk. So there's a lot of kind of data prep work. Who in the audience likes data prep? Who likes doing data preparation work? Okay. There's always one in the audience, but yeah, no one really likes doing data prep. So what does the kind of data prep look like off data exhaust? So when you're building models with this kind of extracted data, you got to do a lot of reverse engineering of the SAS-specific logic. You got to denormalize your stateful tables into fact tables. You got to look at the data quality issues. You got to look at the governance issues. You got to patch bad data. You got to kind of combine siloed data together by source. And then after all of that, you finally get to do the feature engineering, the model training, the fun stuff, the stuff that drives competitive advantage. If you're creating data for the purpose of building advanced analytics and AI use cases, then you can jump much, much faster to the feature engineering and the model training. So this kind of paradigm, data creation, it's quite new. We started talking about it earlier this year, and it's resonated with a lot of data practitioners and data leaders we talk to. So when we talk about data creation, we're really talking about creating net new data, typically about your customers at source. Why do this? So first of all, the data is much more intelligible. The data is much more unique, much more descriptive about your business. Secondly, it's more flexible. So obviously you can map the entities that your business cares about. You can flow those through the whole system. You can evolve those schemas over time. It's more compliant for kind of obvious reasons. You own this data. You own it end to end. You're not at the whims of third-party vendors. It's real time as well, and it's trusted. So you have much more organizational trust in your data. And this is the Snowplow architecture. So this is what we've been building for the last 10 years. So the heart of Snowplow is the create phase, the data creation phase. And we break this down into 3 steps: generate, enhance, and model or gem. So it's kind of a different approach from ETL, from the data extraction vendors. So first you have the creation phase. So we're generating this kind of new proprietary signal. We predominantly do that today in apps and in websites and in server-side systems, but we can also do IoT, we can do wearables, we can do other environments as well. Then that data flows through into the Snowplow pipeline, and there we do enhancement. So we do a lot of validation on the data, and then we do enrichment, where we're basically adding more data points, kind of widening the events, if you will, and adding more interesting information into them. We have some privacy controls in there as well. And then the step after that, so we land the data into the data warehouse. So we support Redshift, we support BigQuery, we support Snowflake. We also can land it into the data lake house, so we support Databricks there. And once the data's in there, then there's a kind of a modeling phase. So essentially you have this very granular, very sort of atomic behavioral signal. And one of the things Snowplow does is helps you kind of aggregate that up to higher latitudes that are easier for analysts and data scientists to work with. And then there's the consumption phase. So Snowplow gets you this data. It gets you this data in a kind of an aggregated way as well. But then your team will start building data products off it. So, they might train models on it. They might build BI and analytics use cases. They might work with a reverse ETL vendor like Census or High Touch to get the data back out into marketing systems and so forth. And then underlying the whole thing, you've got this kind of governance layer as well. So, this data is highly, highly sensitive. This is your consumer behavior, customer behavioral data. This is highly, highly sensitive. So governance of this is really important as well. So what is this behavioral data? This term is probably a bit new to a lot of people. And the way I like to explain this is really kind of breaking it down into different kind of arcs of data. So you think about the different arcs you've got in the company. You've got the systems data. So where is stuff happening? Stuff's happening in servers. It's happening in applications. You've got transactional data. So this is the kind of transactional record of what's happening inside your business systems. You've also got things like demographic data, kind of what are the different types of user. And then this behavioral data is kind of much less commonly talked about, but it's really valuable. So it kind of helps you explain the why of this data. Like, why are people doing specific things? Like, what was their intent when they were performing certain actions on, let's say, your website or in your online shop? And this is kind of another way of thinking about it. So for the more kind of visual people, demographic data. So demographic data is quite flawed. You can have very different people with very similar like person level attributes. This slide's out of date now. King Charles III and Ozzy Osbourne, very similar demographic traits, very different behaviors. Transactional data does give you some visibility on what decisions individuals make over time. But the behavioral data gives you much, much better insights into that, much richer view of how decisions are made, what is the intent, what are the kind of very granular steps on that customer journey. So that's why we love behavioral data, and that's why we've been sort of building out behavioral data creation for the last decade. So what does it, I'll go back to that one. So what does behavioral data look like? This one might not render. So I'll just describe it. So basically, behavioral data it's very granular, it's very atomic. So essentially, it's about, think of it almost as like kind of a sentence structure. So you've got the subject of the subject of the sentence, you've got the verb, which is kind of the event, and then you're attaching objects, you're attaching the different entities that happen in that point in time. It's very granular, very kind of descriptive. Think of it almost as like human language, but it's readable by machines. So a little bit about Snowplow, the company, and the open source project. So Yali, who's my co-founder, we started Snowplow 10 years ago as an open source project. We were very focused on web and mobile customer data. We've been working very closely with tools like Google Analytics, and we'd got frustrated that we couldn't get at the underlying kind of behavioral signal. We didn't want dashboards. We wanted like the fire hose of that data. We wanted every page view, every button click, so we could do any analysis we wanted. And that's how we started the open source project back in 2012. Fast forward to today, and thousands of companies use Snowplow open source. We have over 200 customers as well. Plenty of customers in Germany and in Berlin as well. Loads of open source development has gone into the platform. We have a lot of GitHub stars and some great logos. A couple of those I think are in the Berlin area, like Raisin and Omeo. So I've talked a lot about the tech behind behavioral data. But why? What can you actually do with this behavioral data? Like, why are companies adopting Snowplow in 2022? So I'll talk about 2 killer apps. There are lots of different reasons to adopt Snowplow in different industries. There's lots of reasons you want your own very granular first-party behavioral data flowing into your own data warehouse or lakehouse. But here are 2 I want to talk about briefly. So the first is called first-party digital analytics. And the second is called composable CDP. So first-party digital analytics, think of it as essentially a kind of a digital analytics stack, web, mobile, product analytics, powered by the Snowplow behavioral data, but it's running wholly inside your own infrastructure. So it's wholly inside your own AWS or GCP account. And unsurprisingly, in this kind of environment we're in at the moment, where there's quite a lot of individual country rulings about GDPR happening in Europe right now, there's a lot of organizations that are thinking quite carefully about whether they want to be sending this kind of consumer behavioral data out to third-party organizations. So Snowplow is seen as a part of the solution to that challenge. So yeah, it's very powerful for data sovereignty because it's first party, so the data is just staying inside the company's own account, but it's also being sent to their own domain. It overcomes a lot of browser and cookie limitations as well. And then this third point is important as well. Like historically, kind of digital analytics solutions like GA or Adobe or Amplitude or whatever, they were quite limited in their ability to observe your business because it all depended on what you'd sent in via tracking. The power of building first-party digital analytics inside of Snowflake or Databricks is that you bring your other data sources in. So you do that data extraction using something like Fivetran, get other data into the warehouse, and then you join that up to the Snowplow data. So you create these very, very rich kind of behavioral flows and understanding of your visitors. Composable CDP, so this is about building a single source of truth across marketing and other teams. So a lot of people have purchased these kind of marketing customer data platforms over the last few years. They're powerful, marketers really like them, but they're quite difficult because essentially you end up with this sort of separate architecture where a lot of the kind of business understanding is happening, whilst you've also got a data team separately trying to build a single source of truth, build a customer golden record inside Snowflake or Databricks. And so you end up with this sort of split brain problem. And the composable CDP, that we're a part of that, helps to overcome that. Has a lot of the same benefits as well. So first party customer data has really good governance, and it lets you use these kind of best of breed tools like Data IQ, for example, upstairs. So just briefly, just to show a couple of architectures. So the first-party digital analytics architecture. So here you've got Snowplow. That's feeding through into your data warehouse. Then we're using dbt to take the kind of granular data and model it ready for your analysts. And then you could put something like a ThoughtSpot, a Spot app on top of that to build dashboards that would be kind of similar to the dashboards you get in something like Google Analytics. And then the composable CDP. So like I sort of described a moment ago, you've got your data creation from Snowplow. You've got your data extraction from Fivetran. That's feeding through into a Databricks or a BigQuery or a Snowflake. And then you're building this kind of customer golden record inside the warehouse or the lakehouse. So that becomes the central kind of source of truth about your customer record and your customer behavior. And then you'll take a reverse ETL tool like a Census or a Hightouch, and you'll kind of send that back out to your marketing channels and things like Braze and stuff like that to actually activate those profiles out there and market to those customers. So those are two hero kind of killer apps that we're seeing a lot of adoption of. There's also a lot of other use cases for behavioral data in different industries. So you can imagine in healthcare, there's a lot of sensitivity around healthcare data. Unsurprisingly, people like to keep that data in a first-party way inside their own AWS or Google Cloud account. Media is really big for us as well. We have a lot of media customers in Germany, and that real-time stream of behavioral data is super valuable for doing content personalization, dynamic paywalls, all sorts of stuff. And then retail is really big for us as well. What we saw with COVID was a lot of big retailers in Europe and the US suddenly really accelerated their kind of investment in data, their building out of data teams, their desire to kind of get much more sophisticated about their use of data. And yeah, behavioral data has been really important to them. Covered this one. So the platform, we've been building the open source since 2012. We started building our commercial platform on top of the open source in 2015. We call that Snowplow BDP, Behavioral Data Platform. Essentially, it has the same open source kind of Lego bricks underneath it, but we do all of the automation, all of the monitoring of that, and we also have a UI and an API for our customers. So it's a pretty powerful kind of commercial offering on top of and around our open source. But the core data transit layer is open source, which gives you a lot of confidence in adopting us as a vendor. And yeah, that's kind of it. So just if you're interested in hearing more, a few calls to action. So you can always adopt the open source. We've got Try Snowplow as our kind of easy way of trying out the Snowplow technology, getting kind of your first experience of creating behavioral data yourself, and you'll find that on our website. We're also starting to build out open source data product accelerators to help you to adopt these solutions, these kind of things like composable CDP and first-party digital analytics, working very closely with partners on that, like Databricks and Snowflake and ThoughtSpot, and of course the team. So a bunch of us are here today and tomorrow. We've got a booth on the ground floor. We'd love to talk to you, and if you want to have a one-on-one chat with myself or some of the other members of the team, you're welcome to as well. So I think that is it. 2 minutes to spare, so we're okay for time. Big thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Alex, thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left, so if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to raise your hand.
Any quick questions? I think people are hungry.
Maybe they are, but you said you'll be around and your team is around. So if you have follow-up questions, feel free to visit them at their booth. Thanks for being here.